This is the Lotus Bloom Podcast. And here's your host, Morgan Wiley.
Welcome to another episode of the Lotus Bloom Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Wiley. Recently, I got to go on a trip. Well, okay, not that recently. It's been about 3-4 weeks now. But I went to Orlando, Florida with two very special people who, if you have followed this podcast from the beginning, you may have gotten to know a little bit. Gabby Robbins, I believe her story is episode 3, and Callie Ross, her episode is number 2. And today we are going to have a conversation about our trip because we went to the magical kingdom of Walt Disney World. We are going to talk about the fantastic immersion of creativity that these lands provide and how it impacts us as creators and our ability to tell stories and just even to spark creativity in one another. So I hope you enjoy our special conversation. All right, I'm here with Callie Ross and Gabby Robbins, and we are going to have a fun chat today. So welcome, ladies.
Hi.
So we're going to dive right in. Now, this might be kind of corny, but I just feel like there are places that speak to our souls, places that call out the creative muses within us, and places that just wrap you up in a bubble of creative energy. So yeah, that's totally dramatic. but this place that we went is that for me. And I think it pretty much applies to you too. But correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you got it.
But this place is Disney. All things Disney. But we recently went, the three of us, on a trip to Orlando, Florida. So we had a lot of fun. But it was also a very inspirational time, at least for me, but I'm pretty sure since, from our conversations that it was for both of you as well.
Absolutely.
And it really was kind of a blur. The trip went by so fast because we were just doing all the things, sun up, sun down. So we're just going to dive right in because who doesn't want to talk about Disney? It's fun. We are going to talk about all of the... Well, not all, because we're only talking about a fraction of the creativity that we experienced and saw at Disney World. Now, we also have different experiences. We did go to Universal, and we've been to Disneyland at different times. So this kind of is encompassing all kinds of things of that nature, but we're just going to focus on Disney World right now.
Okay.
If you've heard the podcast before, you have heard a little bit about Callie's story and also Gabby's story. And Gabby, as you may know, is an agent for Pop Vacations, and she hooked us up. She set the trip up for us, and she organized our meals and our fast passes, and she's like the Disney World queen.
For real.
So it was an amazing experience because I haven't been there since 7th grade, and I'm not even going to tell you how long ago that was, but it was basically a whole new experience. So I would have been totally lost. So it was amazing to have Gabby and Callie both, who had been there before and knew the things and took us everywhere and explained everything, and I loved it. It was fantastic. It just made the experience that much more amazing. I'm just going to assume that everyone knows what Disney World is. It's a magical theme park. So we all know Disney is amazing at their movies and their shows and their characters. But today we're going to talk about the lands and the worlds that are extensions of those. Let's talk about how we came into this trip. I know for myself, I was feeling pretty run down. I'd been momming 24/7 and the baby hadn't been sleeping and I was feeling pretty dry creatively, but at the same time wanting to start writing my next book and just was not feeling any inspiration. So I was really excited about spending time with the both of you and also just being immersed in a creative environment. What about you guys? How did you come into this trip? Callie, we'll start with you.
Well, I actually, when we flew into Orlando Sunday night, I had just finished a weekend with our youth group and had slept maybe 4 hours all weekend. And before that, just to briefly put it, the 6 months or so before that, our family had just been supporting my mother-in-law through her fight with cancer. So it came on the tail end of her chemo treatments and going through surgery. And so, I mean, as you can imagine, just kind of not necessarily tired physically, but emotionally and creatively. And so I still had a few outlets. I still feel like that teaching is an outlet for me. Creatively, I like to draw and sketch. And I had just taken on a renovation project in our kitchen. So that kind of stuff was a little bit of an outlet. But going to Disney for me was really about kickstarting my writing again, like you had talked about. I was really looking forward not to being inspired with a new story, because my goal was actually to pick up in a world that I'd already created and written in, but it was really just to kind of gain that spark. And I, like you, felt like that if we were at Disney, I was going to definitely take advantage of the creative sparring and brainstorming that we all did together, which was really, really fun, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But then also just that idea of walking into the park, and you really cannot be anywhere in those parks and feel like you're in the real world. Like I kind of was excited to get out of the real world and be immersed in something that was make-believe, that was magic.
Awesome. Gabby, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Disney is, I go a lot. I'm going to admit that. And,
no shame.
I do need that. No shame there. But for me, Disney, no matter what, is a place that, man, my wheels just start turning. I think, too, because I've been so much, I see new things that I'm like so intrigued by, because when you read anything about Disney parks or about Imagineering, they think about every detail. And my favorite stories or my favorite movies are those movies that use like the smallest little detail to tell the story or to connect something in the story or to give you more information. And so when you're walking through Disney parks or walking through, Harry Potter Land or something like that, it makes you go, what is that? And what does it mean? And like, it just makes your wheels start turning. And so I know that other people feel this way. There are certain people that you get around that your wheels start turning anyways, because they ask questions and you start talking about something. Like there's no barriers up with friends like us who we work well to encourage each other, but it's like, then you don't have to do the niceties of like, not be like, I know this sounds really weird, but what if that was, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think that's the best part of going to someplace like Disney with people who are like a part of your writing group or just your writing buddies or whatever, that it's so cool because you're already excited to be there, but then you're with people that you can let your guard down and just stand in line and talk about stuff, And I just feel like for me, I do a job that should be more creative, but really isn't. And I think that's why I want to go to Disney so much, is that I just get to like have a brain break and be in a place where I'm thinking creatively, and it's not, about stats, or it's not about likes or about ads. It's about just, having that space to be able to think. So for me, it was just a much needed time of break into. We haven't been together for a while. So it was something that I was like, I missed that part. Like even me and Kelly living close or nearer than we live to you.
Right.
Me and Callie don't get together right now. It feels like it's been a long time where we've regularly gotten to see each other. So it was a treat, and it was something that I was really excited about doing.
Oh, for sure. It had been, 2 years, I think, since the three of us had been together?
Yeah, almost.
Because I'm
it's been a long
way
time.
on the other side of the country now.
Yes. I'm not bitter or anything though, so don't worry.
No, no.
No, so I definitely needed some Gabby and Callie time. So I love that, Gabby, you mentioned how you can just stand in line and talk about what if this and what about that, and you look at the details and you talk about all of the imagination that happens, and you're not weird because
No one's
everybody
judging
there
you.
is noticing the same things, and
Absolutely.
because I would do that probably anywhere, and then it would be considered weird. But
I would do it all the time. And you know, I don't think we did this, but we went to the bathroom in Harry Potter Land, but I don't think we went to the ones that are over by Diagon Alley. When you go in, Moaning Myrtle talks to you from the toilets.
oh, I missed that.
The first time that happened, I went into the bathroom with Maya and I was crying. And Maya's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "Did you hear Moaning Myrtle?" And she was like, "Oh God, Mom." It was like it just create that kind of creativity where you're like, where would you hear Moaning Myrtle in Harry Potter world? You know, of course, the toilets. And
Right.
So,
It's
it's
the
stuff
details.
like that
yeah.
where, I mean, my family doesn't judge me. I mean, obviously my kids are like, "Can you not be so loud about it?" But they know that like they're doing the same thing. So
Well, since you mentioned that, let's talk about. Okay, so this is not an ad for Disney Plus, but they have a series called Imagineering, and in episode 3, there is a section where they're talking about Walt's levels of detail, and I mention this because it just that's what it is. When you're there, you notice the detail, but I'm going to mention the levels, and we can even talk about it. But I think they just play together so well to create this amazing immersive experience that, like you said, it's magical. It makes you feel like you are somewhere else, and nothing is out of place. I mean, it's all of the details that that come together to make you not think about it, even though we are thinking about it. But it's like it just makes you feel seamlessly like you're somewhere else. So you can just let your guard down. You can relax. You can have fun and do all the things and be inspired. So Walt's 4 levels of detail are the first one, that you are out in a field. You're further away and you can see over the trees at a distance, you see the church steeple or the top of a building. And then step 2, you come into the town and you can see the parkway or the trees up close and benches and the sidewalks. And then step 3 is you turn and look at a house and you see the texture and the color and the materials and the scale of the house in front of you. And then step 4 is you walk up to the front door and you see the knocker. You feel the metal, you feel the temperature, you can see paint chipping if there is any. It makes it so real that you believe you are actually there in front of this house, in this town, in this world that isn't real. But it tricks your mind into believing that it is because the detail is so intensely done.
yeah.
And I think found
it's-
that amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, it speaks to what Disney was intending to do, was to make a place for everyone that wanted to be imaginative or creative. And if you think about people like us, we look for those details because it matters to us,
Right.
and because it makes it feel complete and it makes it feel whole. But there's some people that don't look for those details, and they'll walk into there and be like, "This is really cool," and they don't know why. But that's the point,
Right.
is that they don't have to question anything.
Yes.
And I feel like when people like us walk into those situations, we see it completely differently, because you're like, "Oh, I see. They did this for this reason, and this is why this looks this way, and that's why this is this texture." And
Right.
and that matters to us, and it fulfills, like, for me, when I talk about my OCD or the way that my brain works, it's like it checks the boxes. Do you know what I mean? It makes it's like I like to get lists done or things done, and I love to check the boxes. So it's like for me, when I walk into Disney World, it's the smell. It's my viewpoint. It's when I get up closer, it's what it's supposed to be. The quality, the cleanliness, those things that matter to me are all there. And then there's the soundtrack. So if I'm in a bad mood, it's like those things that they've included. Smells, I have candles that are Disney scented from every hotel and from every land. And sounds, I am down, and especially now that I'm working from home, I play, like, especially for some reason, the Pirates of the Caribbean, the music they play while you're in the queue. Oh my gosh. I listen to it. It's like a 6-hour loop.
Oh, wow.
And I just put it on and I just listen to it on YouTube. But that's how you can tell those things matter. Like, I have my, my Disney cups, and I have the Polynesian, and they're all things that trigger these memories for me. And I feel like that's also why you have people who are full-grown adults who are just like, yes, I have to be there and feel it, because it reminds you of times when you've been there, but it also, you're getting to experience it again. And two, you'll always see new things that you haven't seen before.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like his level of detail, he made it so that everybody had the highest standards. And then now they're kind of like, of course, going above and beyond with their new rides and their new things. But still, the bar is so high that I feel like most of the times you're not going to be disappointed when you go.
Well, I also think that as creatives, we are technically creators. So each one of us has created different worlds that we've written for and in, and to be in a place that someone has created in their mind and see it come to fruition. I think as a creator, to be in that person's space physically and not just mentally, there's something to that can be appreciated. That kind of like Gabby was talking about. For me, it's the five senses, and then even that sixth sense that it's in someone's imagination, and it is now real, and it can be real for me too. And so, I think we all wish that for our own perfect, ideal worlds that we've created, and even imperfect worlds we've created. But yeah, that idea of being able to step into a space and for it to, from far away, from a few feet away up to, centimeters away, that it is that real. And even at Disney, it's not just about one world being real, but it's about every favorite world that we grew up with being real, whether it's stepping into Belle's castle or the Beast Castle, whether it's walking into Batuu, it's going to Pandora, it's everything. Like, whichever world you feel like being in that day, you don't just get to watch a movie or read a book about it. You can step into it, which is amazing to me.
It is amazing. And we stepped into a lot of worlds in a very small amount of time. Period of time. It was kind of an overwhelm of your senses just to, like you said, just to step into all those different worlds and experience, because they're all different. And it's amazing how you can seamlessly go from one land to another and get a different experience and a different feel just based on their environment and the things that they've created. And even going from day to night, it would be different.
Absolutely.
Especially in Pandora. Is that what it's called? Is that what that area is called?
It's the world of Avatar, but they call it something else. I'm the worst Disney person. Hold on.
But even the experience there during the day, you could see all the detail and the trees and the waterfall. I mean, it was amazing. But then we went back at night and it was mind-blowing, an entirely different experience, and just even more magical.
I'm so glad we went back.
Oh, so glad. Well, we wouldn't have gotten to go on that ride if we hadn't. It was fantastic, by the way, which I believe we will be talking more about on Gabby's podcast coming up.
Yeah. So it's actually Moara is the place. So Pandora is like the world. Moara is the place. So it's the world of Avatar. But when you're there, you're in the Valley of Moara.
Oh.
So yeah.
I didn't catch that at all. Good to know. Okay, so how does the energy of these places, these lands, the immersion of the detail, how does it impact you as you go through them? How does it impact you, and how can you take that away when you leave the park? Gabby, we'll start with you.
I feel like, number one, like we said, it just like kicks your creative juices. Like it just gets you thinking. I think another part of it is creatives are observers. And so when you're experiencing something, you're observing other people and other things happening. I feel like it does such a good job to get you, just because obviously these parks are large and there's lots of people and you have plenty of time standing around. So you get to observe, and it kind of kickstarts ideas. I know that there's a couple of show elements or ride elements that today that aren't in rides anymore, but that every time I ride that ride, I think about them. So as like story ideas, and obviously my book's like way in process and progress, and it's going to be some time, but for a long time, I would get on Pirates of the Caribbean, and there used to be, and I'm so sad it's gone now, but like right when you get on, you're going through the caves, and before there was a mist, and they would project one of the bad guys from the Pirates movies up there. But along the side of the boats, you could hear like song, like a siren singing, and you could see like lights going along the side as if there was a siren like swimming under the water.
Oh.
And they used to also have like the skeleton of a mermaid, and that got taken out because people were freaking out about it being Ariel, which I thought was hilarious. I'm like, we're in the Pirates of the Caribbean. Ariel's not going to be here, but little kids didn't
don't
get
know that.
So, yeah. So they took it out. But it was the whole idea of like the Pirates of the Caribbean, and there were these sirens that were taking you to where the pirates were. So they were singing you that way. And I've always just thought that's just such a cool idea. Like to have when you're in a boat, like, and they're not visually showing you that. It was just the inference of it. And so sometimes I think those like really cool, interesting elements of the different rides really do trigger ideas. And so for me, like, obviously it's being able to not think about anything and being totally allowed to be imaginative and creative. I feel like those places are great for that. Obviously, if you plan well and you're not worried about rides and all of that stuff. But when you're just letting yourself go and enjoy it, I think it's awesome to be able to kickstart that kind of stuff. At least that is for me, because like Kelly said, it's the five senses. You're completely immersed in a different place. And so that's where I think great ideas come from.
For sure.
Yeah, I would say even from the standpoint of Disney, when you get in line, like from the minute that you step in line, it is almost like the plotting process when you're writing a book.
Yeah.
You really can find places as you walk through that line to get to the ride where there are things that are small, like small details, whether it's that you're looking for hidden Mickeys or that there's a tree that looks so real, like you question it. Like, what was this here all along? And and then even big moments in the line where you get to pose and take a picture, where you are reminded of something from a story that you love, whether it's a character or even just like with the Millennium Falcon ride, there are things that are in the line that you stop and you're like, that's in the movie, or that's in that I love that part of the story. And so I think that when you're writing, you can take those moments and remember that during that process of writing your story, you have to implant those moments in your plotting. Like you've got to have those moments where the reader, while they're waiting to get to the climax of the story, that you want them to have those memorable moments. And so that's something creatively that I took away from just waiting in line. And it makes me think, okay, I've got to take every page has got to have something in it that is not just this 2D imagery, but it places them there. It puts them there. And so, yeah, I think that's how you can take some of those times when you are like looking at your watch, or in my case, not your watch, your magic band, because you are a dum-dum. And anyway, long story, probably way too long to tell. But the idea, though, is that Disney makes it where the line, the waiting, it's not waiting. And so I think that when we're storytelling, that's something we can take away, is that you don't want your reader to just be waiting. You want them to be actively participating in the story.
Right. It's a part of the ride. I mean, some of those line cues are almost, sometimes I like some of those even more than the ride ends up being, just because there are so many details and things to look at, and I usually find something new every time.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's great.
And I love what you said about putting that in your writing and, making sure it's not 2D and really it even goes beyond, I mean, we're writers, so that's our perspective and talking about it. But for all creatives, I mean, you could be an artist or musician or whatever it might be and be able to take away these same things and, instill that energy and that creativity into whatever it is that you might be doing.
Sure. It's almost like layering. I think that goes to any artistic endeavor, that there's a layering that happens in storytelling and in painting, even in music. And so that kind of stuff, I think, is so key. And that's, I think, where Disney, that 4 points of being immersed, it really is that layering effect.
I also feel like it's super important. Well, for me, it's super important in my daily life. Like, the idea that someone's coming to visit your home and you want to set the scene. Like, I know it's ridiculous, but I don't have anything else right now besides work. So it's like people come into my front door and I want it to be welcoming. And that's, pillows on my front chairs and, there's nothing growing where there shouldn't be growing, and when they come in, it smells good and it's bright and it's light and it's not scary and, it's clean and food and, I have the way I set things up. I just feel like the reason why for me, places like Disney World mean so much is that the way they present things is the way that I want to present things. I want it to be a complete experience. Like, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but when I go to a person's house and they're like, oh, hold on, let me find you some forks or let me find napkins. And I'm just like, dude, we're eating like here at your house. Why is this stuff not here? Like, I see those things as like, it messes the experience up. And so when you're, living life, writing a story, having an event, showing your art, you want to use the same ideas of like the 5 senses and all of that stuff to set the scene. I think it's super important, to be able to understand too why those are like why I walk into a hotel room and I'm like, this is not okay. Like, I can smell other things that shouldn't be in here. I don't like the way that it's clean. You know what I mean? Like, you have an expectation of people doing things excellently. And when that does happen, it fulfills something in you and it makes you want to go back.
Right.
So doing that in your life or in your storytelling or in your work ethic or your work process, I think is super important. You can take a lot from it.
Yeah, for sure. It's hospitable. It's welcoming. It's ushering you in the front gates all the way in. And like you said, the 5 senses, the smells. I mean, you can smell churros and you can smell coffee and you can smell, and I know they do that intentionally and, to pump those smells out into, and the ice cream and all the things. Yes, I love it. But those are the things that make it feel so welcoming and memorable. Yes. And like you said, it makes you want to go back.
Me spend a lot on candy. Yes. Yes.
I love it.
Oh, so good. Okay, so Callie, you touched on standing in lines and looking at all the details, but what else do we do in the lines? I mean, there are games and there's lots of fun phone games, and I know that Disney has apps that are interactive with some of the lines and the places that you go, but I think for me, especially being with someone else, you guys specifically, that are able to bounce ideas off each other and to just have an open dialogue about the creativity and things like that. Do you want to talk about some ways of releasing that creativity?
Yeah, sure. I feel like that we, first of all, you have to understand that depending on where you're traveling from and the experiences that you have had at home, when you come into a trip like this, I think there is an element of like shaking that off that has to happen the first few hours. And so I think we definitely went through that period where it was just catching up and how is real life? Okay, great. Now let's move on to all of our imaginative like worlds that we like to play in and dabble in. And so for us, I think, and for groups that might go to be inspired and to just really even motivate each other, these lines are great for not only discussing what you love best about the world that you're in, whether it's a line for a ride in Star Wars or a ride. Like I want to say one of my favorite times that we talked was when we were in line for Tower of Terror, and we were outside most of the time. So nature is a good spark for that, but it's about balance too, because in our case, each of us has a different world. So you have to be with people kind of like we've talked about already that you feel comfortable being honest with and kind of even direct a little bit, because when you're in those moments, you have to continue to be in line with them. Like you can't walk away, or you could, but you'd be by yourself at Disney World, and that does not sound like fun. So as far as just sparking conversation to begin with, sometimes I think that you start with things like, this reminds me of this part of my story or this world. One of the things that I think that Morgan, you started when we were in that Pandora world, that Avatar world, it was like, this reminds me of Elandria. And that, I think us being able to share that and it be a safe place, whether it's crying in the bathroom when we hear Moaning Myrtle or just the idea of this world of trees and floating rocks and whatever. The thing is that once you kind of spark that initial conversation, there's some encouragement that has to happen. It can't just, I personally don't think that you can be successful with like, hey, what do you guys think about this? It has to be, there has to be a mutual encouragement that has to happen. Like I have to say, oh, well, what is it that reminds you most of Elandria? Or what would you take from this land and put in your world? And because once I instill that encouragement in you that, yes, I want to talk about this, then you're able to feel comfortable to bring all of that up. And so does that make sense? I feel like that when you're in line, you can start talking about things, but unless you're kind of lifting each other up in that conversation, it may still feel like, oh, can I talk about this? Or is it okay for me to be talking about my world when she has a world too she might want to talk about? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I obviously the brainstorming happens. We kicked it off, I want to say, on Slinky Dog when we were waiting for that ride. And, we were shaking off everything that was going on in the real world. And we like started right up with, okay, what are your goals? Like, what do you want to do? So even having those conversations, if it's not, hey, help me with brainstorming plot, it could also be, I need to set goals. Like, can we hold each other accountable? Like, what do you want to do? What is really feasible? Like, we may be in an imaginary world right now, but what is reality? What can you do in 6 weeks versus what do you wish you could do in 6 weeks? So I want to say we kind of covered a lot of space and time in a couple of days with a lot of different conversations. I feel like we had a lot to talk about, and maybe that's the problem is we did talk about a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, I feel like too, us just saying like there were periods of time where we were standing for a really long time and it would get quiet. But I think when you have people that you can be, like Kelly said, kind of be safe with, you can say something like, you know what, I've been reading this book and this was really cool about this book. And you start like, talking about that and the points that you thought were interesting, and you can bounce those things off of each other. Or I heard this podcast and it was really cool, or, you know, there's this idea that I have. Like, I feel like you have the time to decompress and talk about your own stories, but sometimes the things that trigger the best ideas or that trigger collaborative things are just the things you're enjoying at that moment. So I feel like when you're in a place where you can relax and you can remember, oh yeah, that was this story. This reminds me of that story, or, you know, this reminds me of that thing. I mean, because I think we were like deep down in a cave somewhere and we started talking about a book Callie had read and all these different perspectives and different things. And it's like the weirdest things are going to trigger that. And it's going to be, you know what I mean? Like you just talking about something that can really trigger a great idea. So, you know, I feel like the safety part of it is super important. And also knowing that the people in your group are there for each other and not for just themselves, which I think is super helpful.
Absolutely.
I just want to go ahead and say that is so rare. I feel like we are so blessed and lucky to have each other, because I mean, it is something that I feel like as an artist or as a creative, sometimes we feel lonely that we're the only ones that are thinking about whatever it is that we're consumed with. And so just know that if you are listening to this and you're like, oh, I wish I had that, just know that each of us wished we had it at some point. Like we just were so lucky to meet each other and to be able to pour into each other. And it's about like treating others the way you want to be treated. It's the same way creatively. Like, yes, you want to be able to brainstorm and get help with an idea or concept, but you have to be willing to be that for somebody else too.
Yeah. You need to also find your people by being brave and going out to try to meet your people. Because I didn't know anybody that wrote at all. I mean, I live in a community of musicians and artists and stuff, but nobody that was really reading or writing or anything the way that I like in the books that I was enjoying. And it took me going by myself to a conference with other writers to find those people. So it's not always going to be people in your circle, you know, you're going to have to find those people, and then it's going to take some time. You know, I think we started off our group with different people. And so you just have to, you know, be honest and
be okay with doing weird things like at 2:00 in the morning.
Yes, totally. Yeah, totally. Also, I've noticed too, like Facebook and the internet, obviously it was a big deal when we first got together, but now, I mean, there's a book club in my subdivision. You know, obviously they read big people books because I'm not reading those books. But I'm sure those ladies are finding big common ground books and being able to hang out and drink wine and, you know, read books with people. But yeah, they're just a little too serious for me. Like, I need to be, you know, there needs to be like a magical world involved.
Right.
I'm not in. But I just feel like there are places to find people that, you know, that your creativity might be literally you just enjoy reading books and you want to talk to people about it. And that was my biggest problem, was that I was reading so much and I couldn't talk to anybody about it besides my husband, which I can't complain. He read Twilight for me and talked to me about it.
That's impressive.
That there's a point where you're like, okay, I get it. This is kind of like give and take, and I need to find other people who are doing this because they want to, you know, that kind of thing. So I feel like it does take a lot of trial and error, and it does take a lot of like trust with people to be able to be creative and to be vulnerable with your story ideas. I feel like that's really hard. And so for you to be able to have a conversation with people, especially out in the open, you know, like we were kind of, you know, I know the people around us were like, what the heck are they talking about? Because we were just going on these crazy rabbit trails, but it's super helpful to your creative process to be able to exercise like that.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
To exercise your, you know, your thoughts in your brain that way. And I feel like it's definitely helpful when you have had like a slow period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to springboard off of that, once you've established that and you know, have that moment of honesty and you can talk about your things, and then it opens doors for new things and collaborations and just rattling off new ideas and, oh, what about this? And what if we did this and maybe we could come together on this, you know, and it may not ever turn into anything, but just the fact that we could do that. And because it sparks more creativity, because then, you know, my wheels were turning and then, oh, new ideas over here. And then what about this? And it escalated to the point where we felt like, oh my gosh, we could take on the world with our creativity now. which I desperately needed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are all superheroes in our own right. It just depends on if we're actually going to use our powers for good.
Ooh, I like that. Do we get capes?
Morgan, you can wear a
I'm
cape.
sorry, I don't wear capes.
No
I've
capes
not
for you.
seen The Incredibles. I mean, it's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
I'm
It's
okay
true.
with a magic pen, and then I'll be good.
Okay, so we've pretty much covered all the things, unless there's something else that you think we really need to mention. I'm curious what your takeaways were leaving our trip and bringing it back home where real life is, and, you know, trying to get back into whatever groove you're setting in your creative worlds. How do you feel about that?
Well, I know for me, I think it was kind of a confirmation about really for families as a whole, like for people and families, when you're planning a trip, making sure you do all the planning ahead of time and don't wait till the last minute to get there to do it, especially a place like Disney. Like, as you guys found out, there are a lot of options.
Oh my
and
gosh,
there are
so
a lot
many
of things you can do. So I feel like that left us room because I kind of we made the plan. We already knew what we were going to do. So when we were waiting in line, like there wasn't the stress of like, what's next? What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? We could just kind of relax and use those long waits to talk about stuff and have a meal. And, there wasn't a lot of rushing around. We knew we would get what we were going to get done. And we had an idea of what those things were. But I do feel like you need to prepare for creativity. It's not going to just drop in your lap. You've got to set those times up to do that. And I feel like when this idea of doing a trip came to mind, it was really a justification for me to see you guys, but too for us to go to Disney. But it was like, oh, we need writing time like we used to do. And as much as we didn't get a ton of that writing time, we did get the time to kind of exercise those muscles that we hadn't been able to exercise in a long time, but you have to make that time. So I feel like planning really does have a huge part in this, is that if you start to feel run down, you need to make that time for yourself. And that time for people that are going to encourage you in it. Cause I think it's super important, but I would not suggest going to Disney if you want a break, like a mind break. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's definitely a place to go where you're going to do fun stuff and you're going to wait for a long time. But it's not like for us creatively it is. But I feel like that takes a lot of energy and preparation. So maybe next time we do just go to a house and write. But this was a good way to kind of kickstart for us some stuff that we were needing. But
I'm going to go with that taking away from the trip. First of all, I took away a desire to continue to walk because we definitely walked a lot. And I am one that in the last several months had kind of relinquished any motivation for physical activity as far as working out or getting outside in nature. And so while Disney World does not technically like going for a hike on a trail, there is something to being physically active that helps me mentally. And I'm not going to say it does that for everybody. Yeah. Some of my best ideas are actually in the shower. So hygiene has something to do with creativity too. But really for me, just kind of like Gabby said, I know that I have to give myself a deadline. I know that I have to set aside time every day that no matter what someone asks, whether it's to go to lunch or have coffee or I need to grade papers, that I've got to set aside that time and say, no, I can't do it during that time. I need to be writing. And for whoever it is, whatever that art is, planning ahead and setting aside that time, it should not make you feel guilty. It will, but it shouldn't. You've got to tell yourself, this is something that I'm not just doing for myself, but I'm doing it for anyone and everyone that's going to see what I've created or read what I've created, because that's a part of it. I feel like that it may be a long time sometimes before you feel comfortable with someone seeing or reading what you've created, but you have to justify that time that you are setting aside. And for me, I always get that mom guilt. So So I had it, and I think each of us felt it a little bit that week while we were gone. But in those moments, I knew that I was doing something for myself that would benefit my family when I got home. And it would benefit me creatively when I started writing again. So yeah, my takeaways were plentiful, bountiful. It was a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
And probably if I had time to think about it, I would come up with 10 more things that I took away from it. But I will say that as a writer, especially, I hear about authors that they will take a weekend and go to a hotel and just write for 48 hours. And for the longest time, I always thought, wow, that's crazy. Like, how can you do that? But now I totally understand. I totally get it. You really do have to set that time aside to do it. And it's amazing how much you can get done if you do set that time aside.
I just have one thing to add. Sure. I was thinking about this, and when I got back, I kind of felt guilty because I was like, oh my gosh, we're probably not going to Disney as a family this year. But I took my friends to Disney World.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, fam.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. But I was like, there's a point where it's like you have to, if creativity is a part of you and it's a part of the way that your brain works, if you don't feed that part of your brain, or feed that, or get an outlet of some sort, it could destroy you. And I watched a movie last night that kind of makes me laugh now, called Where'd You Go, Bernadette? Yeah. And it has Galadriel in it. What's her real name? Cate Blanchett. And it was just about this very, very talented architect who did all these absolutely amazing things early in her life, and then got married and couldn't conceive. And then when she did conceive, kind of put everything aside to raise this child, which obviously a great thing. The kid was freaking amazing. The relationship between her and her mom was amazing. But she just didn't recognize the importance of who she was before that and didn't feed that, literally. And I think creatives do that sometimes. It's an all or nothing thing. It's hard to split your brain space because it feels like another world, like two different worlds in your head. But how important it is to put that time aside to do things like this. And I feel like my husband recognizes it, finding people in your life that recognize it, and knowing that I came back healthier because I had done it. We had also walked 10 miles a day, right? Because we had exercised that creative part of us that is necessary for me to be healthy and for me to be balanced and for me to not feel overwhelmed, because there are times where I feel like I know I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but when you can give yourself that time to balance it, it kind of clears your mind, and then you can see things clearer. And I just think it's super important to not forget, as a creative, if you're not doing it full time, like Morgan is doing and Kelly even is doing, you have to be able to make that time for yourself. Because if not, it's kind of like exercising. If not, it's going to be detrimental for you mentally or even your health.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, even, my full-time is really not full-time right now just because of the baby and being home. So I definitely would like to be more full-time, but that's not this season right now. So I definitely feel even what you were talking about is it was starting to corrode sounds too dramatic, but sometimes I feel that way where it's just inside. I just feel like it's shriveling inside me if I am not having that expression and that outlet. And then it affects my attitude and how I respond to my family. And I don't want to be that way. And so I think it is important as creatives, but I think especially also as women, to not put that time first, or not even first, but to give it a priority, to give it a place. I think that I tend to sometimes not, what am I trying to say? Not give it the weight that it deserves, that it is important and it is necessary for me, for my health and my person, to be able to have that.
Hey, did either of you guys read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert a couple years ago?
Yes, I loved it.
I feel like that has a lot of content that's relevant to what we're talking about, because it really is this idea that the creative moments that you have, they're magical, but that also that in those moments, if you don't feed, kind of how Gabby was referring to it, like if you don't feed that creativity and really lend yourself to tell the story or to complete the work, that that magic will move on. Like it's almost that you would starve yourself to where that magic would die in you, but it could be something that someone else carries. And I think one of the stories in it is actually about an author that had an idea and jotted notes down, but never got around to it. And then like 10 years later, and it might not have been that long, but someone else wrote a book.
I think it was her.
Yeah. Someone else wrote a book and she was like, that's my idea, but she had never gotten around to it.
Yeah. And the idea wanted to be out in the open.
Yeah.
I visualize it like, in my mind, it's like a glowing wisp.
Of course.
It just kind of flits about above my head.
Landria.
Right? Well, yeah, I have them there too. So I picture these wisps. Now I sound like a crazy person.
No, you don't. You're
just, off. They're just kind of around and hanging around me. And I feel like if they don't get the attention, then they kind of just, either lose their light or flicker away and go somewhere else. And that makes me sad.
Well, it's so funny that you think it sounds crazy, but that's how people are. That's how puppies are. It's not, it's not weird to think that people gravitate to where they're wanted and needed and even used, like not necessarily in a bad way, but that where they feel like they're being productive. And so I feel like ideas, the idea of magic, like that creativity, it wants to be used. It wants to be productive. And if we're not being productive with it, someone else will,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to read that book again.
I know.
It was a really good book.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. I looked it up.
I never finished it.
Yeah, it's Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yep.
Yeah, I ordered it, I think, right after Morgan read it.
Everyone, go read it.
You're welcome, Miss Gilbert.
All right. Well, any last thoughts?
When's our next
I know,
Disney trip?
Right?
Listen,
Yeah.
I have been. I was thinking though that we might need to alternate it, and I will try to come up with a place that we can meet to have a writing week or long weekend, and then the next time we'll do Disney.
So our family doesn't kill us in our
Right.
sleep.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that really is also the point that we got to go to Disney and this was a magical place for us, but it might not be for somebody else. And that it could be anywhere. It could be anywhere that you feel the creative spark and anything that, will bring you creativity and ignite those feelings inside you that you need to keep creating. So it could be anywhere.
I'm sure there's physically active people that going out, to the woods and hiking or surfing or something like that.
Or for us geeks that love conferences or conventions.
Yeah, those too, for sure.
Yeah, too. Conferences are great. I mean, just talking to other authors, especially people that you never, I feel like the creative brains come in so many different shapes and sizes.
So many.
So you're always going to meet somebody like completely different and interesting. I've always loved to go to. I am one of those weirdly like. I get there, I'm excited, and then I'm up against a wall just watching everybody. But I feel like that's how people work. It's fine.
It's fine. You're still absorbing it all and taking it in.
I'm just absorbing. Like I'm literally just taking all their power away.
You were practicing social distancing before it was a thing,
right?
I'm a freaking pro at social distancing, and I'll tell you that every person in my household, except for maybe my son, who is now realizing he likes friends, that. Everybody's like, this is the best vacation ever because it's like we get to watch TV together, eat food, hang out with our dogs, go on walks, and we have nowhere to go, and we love it. Yeah. Been training for this my whole life, people.
That's awesome. Yeah, really, it's not very different for us right now because we mostly homeschool and we work from home.
Yeah.
And so we're taking this time. We've made some goals personally and as a family, just, even just practical things around the house we want to do, but creative goals and, things to focus on instead of negativity and all of the reports and all the things that can really weigh you down because it's out of our control.
Yep.
And so,
but you are doing your part by
Right.
not going out into the
for
world.
sure. But the
biggest-
things we
I like-
can control are, what we're doing,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we can be
I feel
creative.
like it'll get done sooner if we stay home, which means,
Yes.
I work during the day and then I get to do the things that I haven't been able to do before. So,
Yeah. So I say take advantage of this time.
sure.
We got it.
Write a book.
Write a book.
Okay.
Get on that, Gabby.
Okay.
But I will say I've been excited again to write. I mean, I was excited to start. I'm starting book 5 in the Age of Elandria, and I've been thinking, man, I really need to get on it. But I'm actually excited again. I feel joy about it. I feel inspired, and my time is a little frustrating sometimes. To be able to, I'd love to just kind of dive in and just be there, but for now, I'm baby stepping it and creating my outlines and doing all the things necessary to get me back into that world. But it's been fun again, and just finding new ways to be creative with it and share about it, and that I think that's all a byproduct of having that creative time and just rubbing shoulders with you both. And so I'm excited.
Well, we will have to virtually rub shoulders because of all of everything that's going
Right.
on. But I totally
6 feet.
agree. And I think that one thing that kind of motivated me when I first started writing was someone said if you wrote 1 page a day for a year, you would have a 365-page book. Right now,
That's a big book.
We are in a season where, man, if you have the time and you have the resources, like dive in, jump in, write a book. But if it's something that you are just, kind of dipping your toe in to see if it's something for you, or if it's something you're reluctant to do, or if you're just busy, just write 1 page a day, like put an idea on the paper and see what happens. Because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I can think up a page worth of stuff in about a half an hour, probably less if it's Morgan, because she's got lightning fingers. But I mean, if you really just think about it, that's just, a half an hour a day of writing down a scene or a portion of a scene. So it's doable.
I've also been doing those master classes.
Those are
with
good.
all the amazing writers. Just, I feel like they're so inspiring, like to hear how they did things. And I think that's the other part of being with people that have the same, creative process or that are doing the same thing as you, is hearing the way someone does it sometimes just triggers something in you that, helps you to get further, get more pages in or whatever you need. But that masterclass app is really helpful because I can do it on my phone while I'm on the treadmill, and I can do it while I'm sitting in my bedroom. Like there's just lots of options. So I feel like learning the things that you wanted to learn, like Scrivener or, reading a writing book or whatever, you've got a little more time now to do that. That might be doable.
Yeah, or whatever it might be. I mean, there's podcasts out there, there's YouTube videos, paint a picture, write some poetry. I don't know, whatever it is that you do for a creative outlet or have a passion for, do it. Ladies, thank you so much for chatting about Disney and our trip, and definitely makes me want to go back now.
Let's do it.
We only have 1,000 pictures. I think we kind of need a couple
Just
more.
a few.
just a couple. If you want to see some of our pictures, if you don't already, follow us on Instagram or Facebook. I will put the links in the show notes, but ladies, why don't you sign off with your Instagram handles?
You guys can follow me at Callie Ross or at Callie Creates.
And you can follow me at Gabby Robbins, or Pop Vacations is my Instagram too.
Awesome. And remember, if you are interested in planning a trip in the future, as no one's going anywhere right now, make sure that you hit Gabby up and send her an email at Gabby@popvacations.com.
.com.
Is that right?
And trust me, Disney's going to be doing some deals. I guarantee
I'm going to jump on that, girlfriend.
Yeah, so start planning.
Once we get the all clear, it's gonna be fun times.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
hit me up and we can get you a free quote. Obviously, no obligations, and maybe we'll even send you a picture of Morgan Kelly and I enjoying our time.
And you can always follow me at MWiley Books or the podcast at Lotus Bloom Podcast. Thanks so much. Keep creating. To hear more about Disney and the practical side of our trip, including rides and places to eat and tips and tricks, head on over to Gabby's podcast called Form Family Off the Cuff.